Defense News is proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, we see how satellites are helping the Army hit targets further out. Plus, we learn about new Marine Corps grunt training and your top headlines from around the military. And later, the United Kingdom's plan for space. With the latest news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, this is Defense News Weekly.
C4ISRnet recently held a live virtual discussion about the Army Position, Navigation, and Timing System. In it, Willie Nelson, who leads the PNT program, spoke about the use of the Tactical Space Layer, which is making new capabilities for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, otherwise known as ISR. Reporter Nathan Strout moderated the event and came into the studio to break it down for us. Nathan, a part of your recent webcast was about the Tactical Space Layer. What exactly is the Tactical Space Layer?
Yeah, we had Willie Nelson on, who is the director of the AP&T and Space Cross-Functional Team for the Army, on to talk about the Tactical Space Layer, which is essentially taking satellites to deliver emerging space capabilities to the warfighter. In practicality, what that means is taking satellite imagery from either commercial or government sources, using artificial intelligence to bring out targeting information from that imagery, and then delivering that targeting information to fire systems. So what that essentially allows the Army to do is fire upon perceived threats that are further away than they could before.
Is it essentially like having a recon person but in space, essentially real time?
Yeah, it's not too far different from that. Basically, the satellites act as a sensor that can see much further than sensors on the ground, and delivering that data back to the warfighter. So they can, instead of firing hundreds of feet, maybe they can shoot hundreds of miles.
Another part of the discussion was about a document outlining the future of the Tactical Space Layer. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, Willie Nelson was able to explain that to us, but essentially the Abbreviated Capabilities Development document sets out the initial requirements for this Tactical Space Layer and kind of sets out guidelines for rapid prototyping and experimentation to develop that layer.
All right, let's hear a little bit from Mr. Nelson himself.
So what it does do is it helps guide that experimentation prototyping across the space-based capabilities. It does not suggest that the Army is going to go build a constellation of satellites. I've had that questions many times. However, we are users of those systems and use the data space-based systems have, and there's a lot of folks across the IC and Space Force who have fantastic systems up there today. And I would also want to mention the Army have the Space and Missile Defense Command and has a significant amount of capability internally within the Army as well. So again, it's how do we best use those space-based systems to ensure that we can meet our warfighting function.
There's a lot going on with the Tactical Space Layer. Where are we seeing this happen and when?
So the most high-profile demonstration we were able to see was at Project Convergence 2020. So that was an Army experiment out in Yuma Proving Ground. And Willie Nelson's team was able to use commercial satellites to take images of the battlefield, bring those images down to Earth, process them with artificial intelligence to turn them into targeting data, and then use satellites to transport that targeting data hundreds of miles to the virtual battlefield where they were used to fire on perceived threats.
So what's next in this process?
Right, so at Project Convergence 2020, the Army was able to cut down the sensor-to-shooter timeline from 20 minutes to just 20 seconds. They're going to look to continue developing that with a number of live fire exercises. The biggest one being Project Convergence 2021, where they're actually going to test out how they can fire even further than before. So Project Convergence 2020 took place solely at Yuma Proving Ground. This upcoming demonstration will be Yuma Proving Ground and White Missiles missile range. So what they're going to basically be doing is taking satellite imagery of the White Sands missile range hundreds of miles away and using that to send it back to Yuma Proving Ground to fire on targets there.
If you want to make sure to see these events live, sign up for our newsletters or check out our calendar at defensenews.com/events. And now for headlines. Anglo-German armored vehicle maker Rheinmetall BAE Systems Land has signed a deal with the British Defence Ministry to upgrade Challenger 2 main battle tanks. The $1 billion contract, announced May 7th, will see 148 British Army tanks upgraded to the Challenger 3 standard. The British confirmed a cut of 35% in its main tank fleet in the recently published Integrated Defence Security and Foreign Policy Review. At one point, speculation among media and analysts suggested the government was looking to axe the entire Challenger tank force. The ministry received a major boost to its budget starting this financial year, but it has preferred to focus its spending on domains like space and cyberspace. Despite that, Britain appears to still be interested in future main battle tank programs. The principal upgrade of the Challenger 2 will involve swapping out the current L-30 120mm rifled gun for the high-pressure L-55A1 smoothbore cannon. The Army will be getting new countermeasures to protect against infrared-guided missiles. The U.S. Army's Northrop Grumman manufactured next-generation protection system for its fleet of helicopters has been cleared for full-rate production. That's according to an April 30th Pentagon announcement. The Army awarded Northrop a contract worth nearly $1 billion to produce the Common Infrared Countermeasures Program with an estimated completion date of April 29, 2026. The service will start equipping its aviation fleet with a system beginning with the UH-60M Black Hawk utility helicopter. Northrop has already delivered 100 units to the Army. The 1st Air Cavalry Brigade was the very first unit equipped with the technology. Is Space Force too slow in buying? One lawmaker thinks so. A top legislator in charge of the U.S. defense budget raised doubts recently about whether the Space Force has lived up to its promise to reform the way it purchases its systems. While the nascent service has moved quickly to structure itself into an independent organization, Representative Betty McCollum, who chairs the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense, said in a virtual hearing that she was disappointed in how little the Space Force has done to improve space acquisitions so far. She added that while Space Force has made significant progress in standing up its units, space acquisitions programs have been, quote, delivered late, over budget, and sometimes billions of dollars over budget. And that's it in the defense world. If you want to read more of these stories, head to defensenews.com. Coming up, we'll have some information on Marine training as well as military headlines.
Welcome back. As the Marine Corps looks to evolve the force for future fights, it also wants to revamp how it trains new grunts. Marine Corps Times' Philip Athey was on hand to see the new infantry training course and brings back this report on the experimental trials of the next generation training regimen.
If you're a Marine headed to the infantry, the current school lasts around 9 weeks and it's broken into different specialties based on what your ultimate MOS will be. If you're going to be a machine gunner, you spend a lot of time learning machine gun skills. If you're going to be a rifleman, you learn a lot of time learning rifleman skills. If you're an anti-tank missile man, you're going to learn how to take down tanks. The new infantry Marine course will be about 14 weeks and will take a more holistic approach to teaching infantry skills. No longer will you just learn your one niche on the battlefield, but you learn everything around the battlefield, from land nav, radio operations, machine gunning, rifleman skills, how to take out armored vehicles. So they'll come out a more skilled and well-rounded Marine ready for the battlefield. But obviously that's going to take more time, and that's why the course is going to be longer. It also requires more instructors. No longer will a handful of combat instructors move 200 or 300 Marines through the course. Now they will take more of a squad approach, with one instructor per 14 Marines through the entire class. So they have two reasons. The first is they want to create a more well-rounded Marine for the dispersed fight. You know, when it's just one squad, one platoon, out on its own, on some small island somewhere, each Marine's gonna have to do more. They're gonna have to pull more weight. They're gonna have to be more flexible. You know, if the machine gunner goes down, they can't call back to their weapons company and get another machine gunner in there. They're gonna have a rifleman take over the machine gun. Same with anti-armor. Everyone's just gonna have to do everything in this dispersed fight. The second reason is they want a smarter Marine coming out of the school. They're thinking about making future platoon sergeants, not just future privates. The old course, in part because it was kind of what they're calling an industrial model class, where it's just pushing through students as quickly as possible. The Marines came out and they weren't very self-reliant. They had to, rely on their leadership to be able to get tasks done. This course is focusing on making very self-reliant Marines from the beginning. Guys who know how to get the job done from day one. So where are we on the timeline? The Marine Corps just graduated its first class of 138 Marines from Camp Pendleton, California. They're going to do 3 more trial runs, one at Camp Lejeune, another at Camp Pendleton, and then another one back at Camp Lejeune. After that, they're going to adjust the course, figure out what they did well, what they can improve on, and then they plan on full implementation around 2023 to coincide with the consolidation of almost every infantry MOS. So that a Marine joining the infantry by the end of 2023 will go through this course as the standard. We will keep covering this course as it develops. For Marine Corps Times, I'm Philip Athey.
Thanks, Philip. And over in the Navy, the fleet recently launched its first ever exercise focused on unmanned systems. Hosted by the 3rd Fleet off the West Coast, Unmanned Integrated Battle Problem 21 saw the Navy launch a number of its drone systems in the exercise. Navy Times' Jeff Zazulowicz tells us more about what the Navy is up to.
So the unmanned exercise that took place last month was really a first for the United States Navy. It sought to team up its array of airborne, surface, and underwater drones with manned vessels. And the whole point of this, from the Navy's perspective, was to show, first of all, here's what we can do when we pair drones with, manned systems. And also internally, I think it's a chance for the Navy to see kind of where they still need to do some work. The brass was a little mum in terms of what was going on during the exercise, but one of their chief things from the exercise seemed to involve using drones to extend the line of sight, so to speak, for a U.S. warship. Basically, go out further than the warship could see, find a target, and then the manned warship would shoot a missile at range at that target. The exercise there involved aerial drones such as the MQ-8 Fire Scout and the MQ-9 Sea Guardian, which have been around for a while, as well as some surface vessels that to the layperson would look like a manned boat, but were actually being remote controlled. That included the Sea Hawk and the Sea Hunter medium displacement unmanned surface vessels or surface drones. So you really, if you were paying attention to what the Navy was putting out regarding this exercise, you got to see kind of some of these next generation unmanned systems that the Navy's really keen on going forward. So the Navy's unmanned aspirations are really seen or discussed by leaders as things that will really round out the future fleet, particularly when it comes to competing with China in the West Pacific and the South China Sea. Navy brass see swarms of surface drones or other assets really being able to round out and complement, the manned ships, planes, and subs that are already out there, and almost a faster way to gain some more equality with the Chinese force going forward. There's a lot of people on Capitol Hill and who watch the Navy who are skeptical about whether the Sea Service can pull off their unmanned battle plan. Skeptics point to the continuing fiasco that is the Littoral Combat Ship, the aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford, and the aborted Zumwalt class of warships. These were all very pricey, overhyped, delayed projects, and you have lawmakers on both sides kind of questioning the Navy's stewardship of programs, and that's now kind of bled over into their unmanned plan. The month before the exercise, back in March, the Navy released its long-discussed unmanned campaign plan, which is intended to kind of map the road ahead for the service's unmanned systems. But lawmakers and analysts on both sides of the aisle really criticized the plan as being short on details and measurable goals.
I was really disappointed in what I saw as a lack of substance in the plan. I thought it was full of buzzwords and platitude, but really short on details. And with the recent acquisition program failures that we've had on the last several ship classes, rightly, those of us on this committee are skeptical of the Navy's ability to shepherd this new technology into employable assets that contribute to the lethality of our forces.
For its part, the Navy said, hey, this unmanned campaign plan is just kind of a bare outline of where we want to go. There's classification concerns and stuff like that. But a lot of skepticism about how the Navy is going to pull this off inevitably remains. So what you saw with this recent exercise was a drone coming out party of sorts for the Navy. They were able to demonstrate some of the technology that's out there while also behind closed doors, getting a better understanding of what still needs some work. Either way, however the drone technology shapes out as part of the future fleet, a lot of lawmakers and folks in the Pentagon will be watching how the Sea Service handles this.
Thanks, Jeff. Now on to the Army, where dramatic footage emerged recently of an Army trainee who hijacked a school bus as part of a move to escape boot camp. He faces dozens of charges after he jumps onto the bus in his PT gear with his rifle and ordered the driver to go to the next town. He later ordered the driver and the students off the bus and drove it himself for several miles before abandoning it and running off. Local officials said he was on the bus for a total of 6 minutes with the students.
Probably one of the scariest calls that we could get in law enforcement and as a school district is that a school bus has been hijacked with kids on it with someone with a gun. And that's what we had this morning. So he is under arrest at this time. He'll be charged with multiple counts of kidnapping and whatever charges that we can put on him.
The incident took place near Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And finally, the Navy appears to have intercepted a large illicit arms shipment in the Arabian Sea. Images posted by the Fifth Fleet, headquartered in Bahrain near Saudi Arabia, showed thousands of weapons laid out on the deck of the guided missile cruiser Monterey. The weapons, possibly bound for Houthi rebels in Yemen, included Russian-made anti-tank guided missiles, nearly 3,000 Chinese-made assault rifles, and Kalashnikov machine guns. Several hundred rocket-propelled grenade launchers, sniper rifles, and optics were also seized. The vessel is thought to have originated in Iran. The Coast Guard launched an advanced interdiction team for the seizure of the weapons. And that's not it from Middle Eastern waters. On May 10th, Navy officials logged another run-in with Iranian vessels, this one in the Strait of Hormuz. This time, the Navy said a group of 13 Iranian boats approached U.S. vessels escorting the guided missile submarine Georgia. The fast attack craft made close passes by U.S. ships, with guns manned, eliciting warning shots from the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Maui. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby gave details of the encounter.
The Coast Guard cutter Maui, U.S. Coast Guard cutter Maui, fired approximately 30 warning shots from a 50 caliber machine gun. After the second round of warning shots, the 13 fast attack craft from the IRGCN broke contact.
This is the second time in a little over a month U.S. ships have fired warning shots at encroaching Iranian ships. In April, another U.S. vessel fired shots after 3 vessels from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy approached. And that's it for your military headlines this week. When we return, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack gives her latest tips. On this edition of Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack gives her latest tips on better ways to save.
Are you saving money right now? Seriously, ask yourself if you're saving for the future or even just for a rainy day. Would an unexpected expense knock you off course? For most people, the answer is yes. And though saving can feel like a chore or you feel like you don't have it in your budget, it's one of the most important things you can do to create financial stability. No amount is too small, and with digital banking and apps, it's never been easier. Open a separate account aside from your daily expense account and dedicate this as your emergency savings fund. Almost all banks and credit unions have services that allow you to automatically deposit a portion of your paycheck or an amount that you designate as often as you'd like, helping your money grow even faster. If your emergency fund is already stocked, maybe add the funds to your Thrift Savings Plan, or TSP. This year, the contribution limit is $19,500. It's always a good idea to contribute at minimum the amount the government will match per paycheck, which depends on your length of service. That way, you don't leave money on the table. If the last year has shown us anything, it's that circumstances can change in an instant. Saving even just a little now can help you be prepared for anything in the future.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more of our coverage, be sure to check out our headlines online at Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps Times.com and DefenseNews.com. To get a list of our top stories in your inbox every weekday, subscribe to our Early Bird Brief. And make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And when we come back, more from Defense News Weekly. Welcome back. This week we finish up our conversation with the United Kingdom's top Royal Air Force officer, Sir Mike Wigston. Defense News' Aaron Mehta has more.
So Space Command, obviously the U.S. stood up both a Space Command and a Space Force in the last couple of years as a bigger push to focus on military space issues. The UK is now going to start up its own Space Command. Can you walk us through maybe what that's going to look like and what the interaction with its U.S. counterpart might be going forward?
Sure. So, I was chatting to the Chief of Space Operations, General J. Raymond, yesterday, and giving him some of the details of what we'll be doing with the United Kingdom Space Command. But the UK Space Command is an opportunity for us to bring together some quite disparate elements of largely Royal Air Force units that are operating in space, are closely linked in with US Space Command and the US Space Force already, but that we haven't had a unifying command and control and a unifying organization for them. At the very outset of the UK Space Command, it's an opportunity for us to bring together everything that we're doing in space, in the Royal Air Force and in the UK Ministry of Defence, bring it all under one organisation to make sure that we're channeling the investment that we're going to make, that we're giving the people in that organisation the skills and the equipment they need to make sure that we are living up to our ambition and our Prime Minister's ambition for the UK to take a leading role in Europe in space. And the Space Command will be that nodal point where we engage that we engage with allies like the United States, that we share information, that we develop new systems, and that we continue to benefit from the everything, all of the opportunities that space offers. All of us are dependent on space, and we see behavior from countries like Russia and China, which are developing anti-satellite systems. Their behavior is challenging the freedom of maneuver that we have enjoyed in space, and the global commons that where everybody can benefit from the services that space offers. So those are under threat, and we've got to better understand what potential adversaries are doing in space, and we need to be ready to protect what is our critical national assets in space, and if necessary, be ready to defend them.
Okay. Well, Sir Mike, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you chatting with us, and hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, Aaron, it's been a great pleasure, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
And that's all we have time for this week. Please visit us on militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more coverage. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.